Welcome to Business Playmakers, the podcast that meets with innovators, trailblazers, and leaders to learn about their experience and what success really means. Hosted by entrepreneur and leadership coach Kyle Gorman.
Business Playmakers is presented by the Employer Blueprint. Employer Blueprint is dedicated to management and leadership development through one-on-one coaching and group seminars. You can find free resources from Employer Blueprint through YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And for more information, simply visit employerblueprint.com. Hello, it's your host, Kyle Gorman, and I'm proud to introduce you to today's business playmaker, Jordan Tong. Jordan, after earning his degree in civil engineering from Tennessee Tech University, joined his family business, France Building Services, as a third-generation owner. And in doing so, in 2007, he built the company from just $1.7 million in a small branch in a small city to $10 million in annual revenue with nearly 400 employees operating in 3 states. And Jordan has a true passion for the entrepreneurial spirit. In addition, Jordan offers business coaching where he actually helps other companies in his industry build and scale their company to grow in the same way that he has done. So you're going to hear about some of that entrepreneurial mindset that he has as we get through today's episode. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I look forward to any feedback that you have, and you can certainly find out more about Jordan through elitebusinesscoaching.net. Well, Jordan, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, being able to share with others your experience, your journey, and kind of talk about what success is for you and where you're going. I know that you've had a lot of experience already, and I know you're really an innovator and a thinker, and so I think a lot of people in our audience are going to be able to relate to that. So as we jump in, just talk through just kind of your professional experience so far.
So I graduated college in 2005 with a degree in civil engineering. Mm-hmm. And when I got about 3/4 of the way through my school, I realized engineering was not what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So the last thing in the world I wanted to do was sit behind a desk and design stuff. So nothing wrong with doing that, but I had... Early on, I my parents were entrepreneurs or business owners, and both sets of grandparents were involved in building their own businesses. And again, none of them, they were all small and whatnot, but I just didn't want to go work for somebody behind a desk doing something the rest of my life. And I'm just not wired that way. And so I knew that I wanted to be in the business world doing things, creating and building a business or doing something in that regard. But as an immature early 20-something, I had no idea what that would look like. Sure. So I got a job for I had 3 job offers, and I actually took the job that paid the absolute least because it was a company in Nashville, and it was a small or a mid-sized construction company. But I had the chance to work under the 3 owners and work directly under them, and these guys were brilliant entrepreneurs and creators, and it just was a neat place. It wasn't a big stuffy corporate environment, but it was a place where I got to sit under those guys, and so I learned a lot from them. But shortly after that, my family owned a janitorial and maintenance company back in my hometown of Owensboro, and so after a couple years in Nashville, I had an opportunity to come back and join the family business. And we were a small company, but I have been there and doing that ever since. And that's evolved into a lot of different things, but in terms of my career path, that's kind of how I've gotten to where I'm at now. And so we plugged along in that business for a while and has gotten to a point, and I'm dabbling in creating and working in some other projects at this point. Yeah,
and so to that point, I know you tend to have a lot of ideas, and there's some projects that you've started up, and I know through some conversations with you, you've shared that you realize and recognize one of the real strengths that you have is being able to understand scalability and look at scalability and drive that. So you want to share what are a couple of the other kind of projects or businesses that you're involved with and working on now?
Yeah, so the janitorial and maintenance company that I'm an owner in has, and again, it's so much credit to my team, but it's gotten to a point where they've worked me out of a job because there's some fantastic people that work there. Yeah. And so one of my good friends and a mentor of mine has talked about, there's some people are creators or starters and other people are sustainers. Yeah. And so I'm wired more as a creator, starter. I really get a thrill from creating something out of nothing. So yeah, some other projects that I'm working on. So about 2 years ago, we started a construction company because I have that sort of background, and my dad was also gifted in that area. And that has been a tremendous challenge, and we've had a lot of success in that, but also a lot of failure. So I'm learning a lot from that, and we're having to make some tweaks in what we're doing. It's about killed me this year trying to get that thing off the ground. And then a couple of, I'm very intrigued by the online world. So everything I've done so far has been traditional brick and mortar type business, and servicing through providing physical products and services. And my mind has been opened up a little bit to the online world and the vast community out there, and specifically the business opportunities. So I'm doing a little bit in terms of business coaching, some folks in my industry, in the janitorial and maintenance industry, and using a web-based platform to do that. And then also I'm partnering with a young lady, and we've started an Amazon business that's selling a product in kind of the mom-baby category, and there's also a blog associated with that. And so those are things that I'm just tinkering around with and seeing what sort of opportunities are out there. I'm not devoting a ton of time to it, but it's always fun to create.
Yeah, and I know, in that baby mom category, kind of near and dear to you. How many kids do you all have now?
Yeah, great question. So my wife and I have 5 kids. Ages 9, 7, 5, and then twins that are 2 years old. So so that I wanted to create something that my family could get involved in. And so the Amazon business and the mom baby stuff, my wife is passionate about that stuff. And I've been able to get my kids plugged in a little bit, and so it's been fun. That was one of the drivers behind that.
Yeah, neat. That's very cool. So along the way, and as you've kind of gone through your career, who are some mentors that you've had, and what are some characteristics of those people, I guess, that you really look to?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think there's 2 types of mentors that people have in their lives, and one would be what I call like mentors from afar, and those are people that I don't know personally, but that I have listened to and sat under their teaching, and they probably don't even know it. But so as I look back, I would say a couple of those. Early on, probably the one that influenced me the most was Dave Ramsey early on. And I know that may sound bizarre because I know he's a personal finance guy and he's moved into the entrepreneurial space. But when I was in college and even in high school, I remember listening to his podcasts or his radio show at the time. That was before podcasts. And you could just tell the guy oozed entrepreneurial and oozed business. And he was motivational. He was excited. He was passionate about what he did. He also taught me the idea that, making really good money is not antithetical to serving people really well. And he did both of those things really well. And then he was also always talking about, successful people read, an average of 2 or 3 books a month and, all these things. And so he turned me on to other motivational speakers like Zig Ziglar and some other gurus in the industry like, Jim Collins and Stephen Covey and these. So these would be mentors from afar that really amped me up early on to think, man, I want to enter into that world. I want to do that. I want to model my life after those guys. And so those would be the mentors from afar. And then I think there's some that were other mentors along various stages of my life. So I mentioned, working in Nashville. So the bosses that I had there were the 2 main owners of the company. One of them was a very wealthy entrepreneur, real estate developer, you name it. But he was the kind of guy, the classic guy that would come in, yelling in the office and getting things done and just flying all over the place. No structure at all whatsoever about his life. But he was brilliant. He was one of the original investors in O'Charlie's and some other things in Nashville. And then the other owner was an architect who had started this company that we were in. He was very methodical and he worked very hard. He was the classic, get to the office at 6 a.m., leave at 6 p.m. You work on Saturdays. So he taught me a lot about, some things I learned from him that I don't want to do and other things that I like to model. And he, again, showed me what a small professional firm should look like and the way the owner should conduct himself in the business. And so I really learned a lot in my first 2 years being able, and was very fortunate to be able to work directly under some men like that. In terms of other mentors, my parents, I would consider them mentors, all through my life, and they were really more blue collar folks growing up with, neither one had a college degree. My dad dropped out of high school and ended up getting his GED, but they were people that were dedicated to hard work and serving their customers, and very thrifty with how, we spent our money and that sort of thing. And so I learned a lot about the principles that I run my business now by, things about like staying away from debt and not, putting other people first. My parents were always the type that they did not take out a ton of money for themselves, but were very generous to, me or other people in the business, and they did not, drive lavish vehicles or that sort of thing. And so it was always a company first mentality. We're going to stay out of debt. We're going to make sure all of our vendors are paid right on time or even before time. And so it was always a, hey, we'll reap the benefits later mentality. Right. And I have, I'm really just seeing that now as I'm talking to you, but I've just adopted that mentality, and I owe a lot of that to them. Yeah. They're always the utmost integrity and honesty and those sorts of things. Yeah. And there's some other business owners, I know some of them are mutual friends of you and I. Yes, Bill Barron is a good friend of mine, and he's been a mentor both spiritually, and him and his wife have helped counsel my wife and I. I used to spend the night at his house when I was a kid, and so he's one of those men that I've just admired from afar. He's just the quintessential entrepreneur that is just oozing with wisdom, and he's made tons of great decisions and some bad decisions, and he's always wanting to help teach and coach other people, and I just couldn't say enough about the guy. So
good. Hey, I'm actually looking forward to having him on the show here in the next couple of weeks, so that's going to be exciting just to get a chance to kind of hear his story as well. Yeah. And I know around this area, a lot of people really look at him and what he's been able to accomplish. Yeah.
So one other this may sound strange to some of your listeners, but there's a couple of people that work for me. I mentioned earlier about having a really talented team. There's a few people that work in my office that I've been fortunate enough to bring onto our team that they are light years ahead of me in so many areas, and I learn from them all the time. So in my business coaching endeavors, when I'm working with other business owners around the country in my industry, I am constantly referring back to the things that I have learned from managers that are running my company. And so I can't say enough about those. That's great. Those people that are doing that.
Yeah. Not only is it smart to find those people and hire those people, but it takes the right personality and a great leader in an organization to recognize these people know more than me. And I'm not only am I comfortable with that, I encourage it, I enjoy it, I like that, because oftentimes it's our ego that gets in the way whenever we're trying to grow a business. And but to be able to know, I've hired these people because they're better than me, and now I'm really going to get out of their way and try to learn from them to make me better as we continue. Yeah, that's great.
Pride is the number one downfall of business owners.
Yeah, it will. So true. Yeah. Well, so through the course of your career, is there a moment that really stands out in your mind as just kind of a big win, a pinnacle, peak moment for you?
That's a good question. No, not necessarily in terms of big wins or big losses. We've been the kind of company. So I'm a fan of taking risk, calculated risk, but I'm not somebody that's betting the farm on one thing and then having huge wins or huge losses. So I'm more of a tortoise rather than a hare, so I'm in it for the long haul. And so, but in terms of wins, I would consider some more small wins for me in terms of professionally is just seeing the growth and development of our company. It's just one of the greatest joys of my life. And by that, profit is one measure of that.
Sure.
But other measures of that are just your impact in terms of people you're able to employ and watching other people thrive in their careers, watching the business grow, which means you're doing a good job of servicing customers. And, and that's just, that's the stuff that gets you out of bed in the morning. And it's exciting and fun. At some point you see, it's not about the money, or it's not all about the money at all at some point. So, and fails, biggest fails would tie along with that. With wins, there's always fails. And again, I can't think of any giant failures, but as I look back, one of the mistakes that I made early on, specifically in my early 20s and when I was first involved in management, is avoiding conflict. I was a people pleaser, and I still am, and that's maybe a struggle of mine or a weakness of mine at times. But instead of confronting a situation head on, we'll let it fester, and it ends up creating more problems on the back end. So allowing situations in my company or allowing things to happen or allow people to stay longer than they should without correcting problems.
Right.
And then I end up in a worse place than before. And so I lose credibility as a leader. The company's worse off. And that has probably happened more times than I would really care to admit. And so as I've gotten older, I've learned that, man, those are some pains that I have seen happen early on. Yeah. So now I'm learning it's better to make sure expectations and intentions are clearly laid out on the front end, that you're staying on top of those. And that it would even tie into customers. Avoiding conflict has caused me to anger customers by not coming through on promises, over promising, under delivering because I wanted to please them and those sorts of things. So, and a lot of that goes back to pride too, as perverse as that sounds. Like it's my not wanting to look bad. I want to look good to everybody. Got me in trouble.
Sometimes not thinking about the long-term effect of something. I think you're right. That's a great point. That's something that gets in our way oftentimes, part of our human nature, and I think especially people that are growing businesses or they're in that world, kind of that driven personality, that oftentimes gets in our way, just our personal pride. That's a really great point. So let's talk a little bit about success. And starting off, how would you personally define success?
Yeah, so I think you had mentioned earlier about how that changes over time. I think in an earlier conversation we talked about how success for you changes over time. So when I was just out of college, I feel like I had a very immature view on what success is. And really, I tied success to money, to financial wealth, right? If you have a lot of money and you have a big house or these sorts of things, like you have reached success. And so the downfall of a lot of the success books that are out there, and there are more than there should be, it's all about, living life without having to work and all this passive income and, all these things and making big money. And so I was really driven by that early on. And my wife, that really frustrated my wife, actually. It bothered her because it seemed so materialistic. And she was right. It was. And so, over time and looking back now, I see that is certainly not the measure of success. And so, the way I always describe company success or success in general is it's like when you go to the doctor and they run this battery of tests on you. Like each one is a marker of health. And so like your blood pressure is not the only thing that is the only measure of your health, right? So they measure your blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, your BMI, and all these other things, your reflexes and all these things. And these paint a picture overall of your health. And so I would say that your success of your business and also in your personal life would be the same way. So, if I'm looking at my business in terms of success, I do think profit is one measure of that. I think our growth as a company is another measure of that. Our reach and impact, serving customers, how much we're able to give away and support other organizations in the communities we're in, career development of our employees and their growth as professionals. So like seeing people develop as professionals and make more money over time and gain more competency, getting better at what we do, even the moral and spiritual impact of the people that are working in the places that we're in and marriages that are affected by what we do. So I think all of those things together would paint a picture of business success. Right. And I would say on a personal end, money is a very small picture of success. I mean, I think, money or profit can be a measure of how well you've served other people. Because you look at the people who are the richest people, usually those people have the greatest impact on society. The Bill Gates of the world, or the Warren Buffetts. You look at the companies they own and how they impact society. But if that comes at the detriment of your family or your spiritual health or your physical health, then I don't know that you could really say their success is wrapped up in that. So, I mean, obviously, I think your soul is the number one important thing. And then your family would come after that, and your health would come after that, and your emotional and mental development, and really a flourishing life. So, the downside of the business culture, and specifically Western culture, is we define success very narrowly, and that can be a trap. And it's a trap certainly that I can fall in. Can
you remember a moment that or maybe even just sort of a season in your life where that reality maybe hit you or struck you that maybe financial wealth is not the only measure of success that I need to be paying attention
that's a
to? Great
question. So once I read an article one time that talked about and I don't know how they gauged happiness, but said that the happiest people were people who made in the $70,000 to $80,000 range.
Wow.
And that less than that, there was diminishing happiness, and then the more money people made after that, the happiness factor went down.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting because, really at that money level, you kind of have been able to satisfy all of your basic needs and have some left over to do some extra. And so there has, you come to a point in your career, if you're successful monetarily, that you reach a certain income level, and it's really a lot less than what you think it is, that you think, okay, what now? Yeah. Like, is another trip really going to make me happy, or is a nicer car?
Right.
No, actually, in some senses, it makes you feel worse.
Yeah.
Because you're banking your happiness on those things.
Right.
And the more you try to buy your happiness, it's like, that doesn't work.
It doesn't feel good.
That feels terrible.
Yeah.
And so I would say it was, probably once I, maybe reached the 6-figure mark in terms of income, and was able to if I wanted to go out to eat somewhere, I could just go eat, or if I, anything I wanted, not anything, but within reason. Like if my wife and I want to go on a trip, I just didn't have to think about it. And so at that point, it's like, man, more stuff sounds gross. I think I'd rather simplify my life and invest in my family. So now my focus is more on what I would consider a truer measure of success, which is my family and freedom to do things and invest in things that I think are worthy things. So.
Yeah, that's good. I can kind of remember a very specific season where that reality started to hit me, kind of when that same focus, that it was all about the money and chasing that dream. And looking back now, there's so many things that I kind of do the same thing. I can look back at the end of the week and say, maybe I didn't make as much money as I would have or did at one point in my career, but the time you get to spend with my kids and, get to go on a date with my wife and, spend time with friends, that there's a fulfillment that comes in that. And, and of course, as you were talking, even on the personal financial side, going back to early mentor of Dave Ramsey, I'm sure that at least some of those principles that he teaches on personal financial stability have carried over as you've gotten older. And, that makes a big difference too. If my son just not that long ago, just a couple weeks ago, said, "Dad, are we rich?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. What does rich mean?" And he said, $1 million. And I said, $1 million what? $1 million in my pocket, $1 million in my bank account, $1 million invested. What does that mean? And so we were kind of talking through that. And I said, "But son, what you have to realize is he's 10 years old." And I said, being rich isn't about how much money you make. Because he said, "Well, you should make a lot of money, businesses, and mom's a teacher," and I had to explain the salary of teachers and how that works. But he said, "Well, that doesn't make sense." I said, "No, it doesn't." But so we were talking about that, and I said, "But it's not about how much you make; it's about how much you spend." So there are people that make a whole lot less than us, but that may be richer than us in certain ways, and there are people that make a whole lot more that could be poorer in a lot of ways, because it's not about income; it's about what goes out, and that's I think that's a lot of that kind of happiness scale as well. That when you can meet those basic needs plus have surplus without having too much, there's sort of an inherent level of responsibility that comes with that. Yeah. That whereas as that income continues to increase, it's easy to lose that responsibility because you don't have to quote worry about it anymore. Yeah. And so that's I can definitely relate and appreciate that.
Yeah. So you mentioned your son. So my son, a little while back, we were driving in the car together, and so I'm always trying to find ways to teach them about different things, right? Yeah. Always finding a teaching moment. It probably drives them crazy. But my son, I was telling him about the Amazon business. So the kids are getting involved and wanting to know, how much does it cost? How many did we sell today? And that sort of thing. And so anyway, my son, I was telling him, if you sell this many, you would get this much money. And so he had in his mind, he loves to fish, and he wanted this tackle box that was $30. And so he said, "Man, Dad, I could make, we could do this and I could make $30. And I said, "Man, but if we sold, 100 of them, we could make $500. And he goes, "Dad, I just need $30. I just want a tackle box."
Tackle box.
And then he said this, and this is what just is like a knife stab me. He said, I just don't want my mind all clogged up with money.
Wow.
And he said, Dad, is your mind all clogged up with money? And I thought, man, I didn't have any response for him. I just sat there quiet, and I thought, man, that is convicting.
Yeah, pretty profound.
Because
for a
he's
kid.
free and happy, and he just wanted a tackle box.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to be cluttered up with all these thoughts of money. I have a life to live.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that's some wise words from the 9-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. keep that kid. Keep a hold of that. Yeah, those are brilliant words. Well, so do you consider yourself successful where you are now?
Well, we talked about pride just a minute ago, so I want to be careful how I answer that question. That's a good question. I mean, so in terms of the world's eyes, and I feel like I've achieved some measure of success in terms of our business and where we have gotten. And but again, I know you and I share similar convictions, so I think success obviously goes much deeper than that. Mm-hmm. And so there's a sense in where there's seasons of life and there's hills and valleys. And so to me now success is more defined in my relationships with my wife and my kids. So in my business. So there are times when, I feel like my business is successful at this point and is thriving, and there's people being blessed and growing, and customers are being served well there, and my home life is going well. So I would say there's a sense where I've achieved a certain level of success, but there are also challenges with raising kids and marriage, and I have struggled at times spiritually, just in getting caught up in busyness. And so I want my trajectory to always be north in terms of true success and flourishing as an individual and as a Christian. But there are times when you're going backwards a little bit. You can be pushing for company success, and things at home can be going in a direction they shouldn't be going. Yeah. But you hope that the trajectory for all of that is up. Yeah. And and to be honest with you, I think that my wife would be a better judge of answering this question. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So let's move to the future a little bit. What do you think the next 10 years look like for you professionally?
Yeah, great question. So there is a struggle that business owners have, and I know you have it and I have it, and it's we call it shiny stuff syndrome,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And so you get the core business going and it's running, and there's a sense in where it can oftentimes, specifically I think if you've done your job as a leader, begin to run itself. And then you ask your questions, what's my role now? What am I supposed to be doing? Right. Do I find a spot in the business and plug away? Do I create something new? Do I give it all away and go join a nonprofit? What the heck do I do?
Yeah.
And so those are some things that I'm trying to figure out. I have, in the last couple of years, I've overextended myself and made some mistakes in dabbling in too many things that really didn't take away money. They were semi-profitable, but created some emotional stress in my life, and so those were not helpful. So I'm in a season where I'm really trying to figure that out. I have a couple of desires. One is that I would be a very engaged father and husband, and also we homeschool our kids, and so I have a unique opportunity to bring them into some things, and so I want to create a scenario where I can teach and train them in a business or in my business in some capacity. But again, like you said earlier, I am a starter and an entrepreneur in heart, and so I feel a little bit of a sense of calling that, as a creator, I should be focused on creating things and knowing that there'll be some failure in there. So I have a few things in the works that could maybe be nice additions to our company and add value. But that's a tension that I'm really wrestling with. I do not have that figured out at this point.
Well, but it's good that that is something to be figured out. There's a lot of it's a good quality to be able to recognize the challenges that you face, maybe the weaknesses that you have, and being a starter and an innovator and an entrepreneur, that can be a weakness at times.
Yeah.
Because as you say, and you and I've kind of talked about this. I suffer with this as well, kind of chasing rabbits and finding these new shiny things and saying, what about this and what about that? And so, but I think the first key, as with anything, the first key to fixing that is knowing that that's there.
Right.
And hopefully having others around you that can hold you accountable to that, so that whenever you've got these million ideas and then you come up with the one that you want to go with, that you've got people around to say, that is a really great idea. Is that where you need to be spending your time right now? And so,
yeah.
But that's good that at least you recognize that. And of course, you've got several years left and kind of working years left. And to that point, I know that this is years down the road, but what does the concept or the definition of retirement look like for you?
That's a great question. I hope I have a lot of years. I'm only 34, so. But Lord willing, I do. And it's a great question. So I can look at that from a couple angles. As a Christian, and I believe that we were made to work and cultivate on this earth and serve others. And so there's a sense in where there's no such thing as retirement in my eyes.
Right.
And in the traditional sense, like for me, just to sell everything and move to Florida and waste my life away picking up seashells on the beach, to me that's an incredible waste of a life. And there's certainly times for pleasure in doing things, but I don't see from a worldview standpoint, and also just from a practical standpoint, I just don't understand that. So I think that we are designed as human beings to serve others, and we derive great amounts of joy from doing that and creating and that sort of thing. So, in terms of retirement, what I would like to see, I think of it in terms more of having more freedom as time goes on, and freedom to invest in or do things as I would like. So a lot of times, especially early on in our careers, we're really constrained to, or we feel at least boxed in because we have to make sure we can pay our house payment and we have kids to send to college. And so we don't feel really free. Sometimes we feel shackled to work because of obligations that are out there. Some of them are necessary, some of them are unnecessary.
Right.
So I look forward to developing maybe more freedom in my life where I can strategically invest in exactly what I would want to invest in.
Yeah.
And so, retirement in terms of that is what that would look like. More freedom to invest in terms of my time where I would want to strategically. And that would certainly involve being on the beach at times, or I'm a big outdoorsman. But man, I think I would go crazy in about 6 months if I wasn't working. And I saw, interestingly, my granddad owned a construction company, real hardworking guy his whole life, and just always had a small company. And when he retired, he passed away within a couple years of retirement, and I just saw his quality of life go downhill really quick because he was just a man that worked, and when that was gone, it was like his life was gone. And maybe there's some things he should have done different, but I'm wired to work, and I derive a lot of joy from it. I don't want to be shackled to it when I'm in my 60s, but I definitely plan to work.
It's funny. I was just having a conversation similar not that long ago, and actually I think it might have been with my dad, who is retired and is always kind of looking at what do I do to kind of have fulfill a purpose and things like that. And he and I were having that conversation, and I made that same comment just as we were talking. I said, I believe there is a reason that you often see, and obviously not always, and I'm sure people will tell me the stories of someone that retired and sat on the beach and lived for 50 years, but I think often you see just that, like you're talking about with your grandfather, that I believe we were wired to work, and when we stop doing that, it's like we stop giving our body the energy that we were really designed to get. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's fairly common to see people stop working, stop doing whatever it is, whatever that doing looks like, and then quickly deteriorate. Because it's easy for the mind to go when it's not working and functioning like that. It's easy for the body to go whenever it doesn't just have that kind of concept of purpose. And I agree completely. I think that there's just something to that we are wired to be that way. And when we when we stop that, it's like we're going against the basic functions of our system.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, because we thrive on purpose, having a purpose.
Yeah.
And when people who go through depression or other mental illnesses, like a lot of times they feel like there's no purpose in life,
Right.
and they all of a sudden mentally they go downhill. And when you retire and you choose not to work anymore, and there's nothing else that plugs in and fills that purpose of why I'm living.
Yeah.
You're right. Like your body's like, okay, well,
Right.
We're done.
I guess we're done. Yeah, this is it. Now we know. And we've talked a lot about kind of money and early on chasing that dollar, and then kind of understanding that personal fulfillment. And so as you sit today, if you walk out of here today and you find out that you've just won $1 million, what do you do with that?
That's a good question. It probably would not affect my life in terms of my time at all. I'd probably continue doing the same thing. I'd pay off my house and and the office building we just bought for our new company, and that's probably what I would do with it, and have a little bit left over and put it in savings. And I would keep going about what I'm doing now. I mean,
a little more.
Even if you amp that up to $10 million, I still think I would tell you the same thing.
Yeah. I've often thought about that. I like to ask that question every time in this forum, and I've thought about that a few times, that I might need to increase that, because the reality is $1 million means you're walking away with $500,000, and $500,000 by the time you pay off a house and some debt. Sometimes it's not a lot to really change your life. So
I have about $200,000 in my mortgage and a little bit else, so there wouldn't be a lot left over.
It doesn't take long. Well, let's look forward a little bit at how we kind of help others, and one of the real the desires of this format and offering up this podcast to people is to help others sort of identify within themselves and relate to others, and then figure out how they can kind of wrestle with this concept of success and professionalism. So the first thing, let's talk about the characteristics that you've experienced in either a boss or maybe a coworker, but what are some characteristics of kind of your favorite boss? Who are the personalities that you gravitate towards professionally?
Well, that's a good question, because I've only had one boss. It was only for like 2 years. So, but as I look at my very short stint working for another company, and really working for my dad early on, because when I first came in, I was not an owner or was not running the company. And I think anyone who is a high performer, or what I would call an A player, they do not want to be micromanaged.
Yeah.
And so, interestingly enough, I'm doing a webinar today for my consulting group, and we're going to be talking about this very topic about bringing A players onto your team in our industry. And a few things, like A players, they want freedom in their job. Like they want to say, here's the objectives, now go run with it. Yeah. So, I think any good boss that wants to cultivate a company of thriving, high caliber leaders will not micromanage his employees.
I agree completely.
You can drive your company to the ground, and you will never find freedom as an employer if you're a micromanager.
Yeah.
And I can hear all the people screaming, no, but things will fall apart if I don't. Well, you're just a testament to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing. I think another thing in terms of, as I look back at frustrations, I am a fan of pay for performance.
Yeah.
And I think, again, A players want to be compensated based on how well they perform. I could very possibly still be working for another firm if I was treated like an entrepreneur within that firm.
Right.
And so if someone was saying, hey, man, here's your territory here, you run with it, the more profitable it is, the more I'm going to pay you.
Right.
I would thrive in a situation like that, even though I wouldn't be the boss.
Yeah.
And so I want to treat my people that way. And so if I'm giving advice to someone, that's the kind of boss that I would want if I was in a situation.
Yeah.
So those two things, freedom and performance-based compensation, would be two things that. And then having fun in a workplace.
Yeah.
I am not a fan of stuffy corporate environments, and I know you're not either. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
It's life sucking.
It is.
And we talked about happiness factor. Like happiness goes way more than just the job. So like family life needs to be good. And when you provide a place that people love to be, and you give them freedom, and you allow them to act as an entrepreneur in the workplace, you attract high caliber players. And it makes for a fun place to work. So if I am, again, I don't have a lot of experience working under somebody, but if I would, that's the kind of boss that I would want.
Well, so and let's take the flip side of that, and we'll talk specifically. Someone that owns the company's works, hires people, and have certain characteristics that you're looking for in the people that are working for you. What are some characteristics or some personality traits that you try to steer clear from?
As a leader, or for people I'm trying to hire to work for me?
Well, so let's say both. Either someone that you're required to follow, whether it be in that kind of boss relationship, or even someone that you are looking to hire in your organization. What are some personality traits that are not going to work well, either with your personality in general, or just that you see out in the workforce that you say, this is something that I think we have to stay clear of?
Okay, so as if someone's a professional or a leader or an owner of a business, things that I would say, watch yourself in these things, because these are the things that are not going to attract the right kind of people in your organization. One, I mentioned micromanaging, not being like that. There's this classic mentality that the owner or leader is this, savior riding on a white horse, Donald Trump kind of person, right? And so, but if you look at the research and you look at the great companies, they're usually run by more humble, self-effacing type of people that you really have never heard of. And, they're not these brash, brazen, Mark Cuban kind of guys. Not typically. And so I think more people desire to work under someone who has an air of humility about them. But a firm set of convictions about what they believe and where they're going as a person and as a company. So that's the kind of boss that I would encourage someone to be, and not be the micromanager, not be the arrogant jerk, not be the person that's out for themselves. Company first, people first. Leaders eat last sort of mentality. Now, in terms of hiring people within the organization, I love Patrick Lencioni's humble, hungry, smart. As I have thought about that, I could dive into some other character traits, but man, those three just hit it right on the head. Humble is so right. Everybody that's in business is serving somebody else to make money. And it's the beauty of capitalism. And if you don't serve people well, you will not make money in the long run. And because usually shysters get found out. Unless you get bailed out by the government,
It's a whole other level of.
But so you have got to have an air of humility about you in your business. If you're going to succeed in any capacity. So we want people that are like that, and we have had some arrogant folks work for us, and they quickly end up not with us.
Doesn't work.
And I have hired people that were not humble because I thought their skill set was good, and they never work out. It's amazing how that. And then the hungry, you want people that are competitive and passionate and driven people, not, Eeyores that are just, I'll come to my job and get my check and go home. We don't want those people, And then the smart, and again, in his book, he talks, it's more about people smarts, understanding emotional intelligence and being able to relate to people and understand social cues and being able to see your own emotions and control them in order to accomplish a desired outcome. And for us, and again, I realize this is unique to us, since we're in the janitorial industry, one of the unique things for us is we're looking for managers. We need someone that can interact with managers at a Fortune 500 company, but also somebody that can work with and train people how to clean a toilet. And so we're looking for folks that not only are humble and hungry, but also have, we call them blue-collar professionals. And so we're looking for people that, mama and daddy raised them right to work, but they also know how to carry themselves professionally. And those are the kind of people that thrive in our organization. And that's unique to us. But
Well, I think that really speaks to the smart function of that tripod and that emotional intelligence, because someone with a high EQ has that ability. They're relatable. But that's a great point, especially in your environment, kind of that character that you're looking for. Now, you've mentioned a couple of resources and books kind of along the way as we've talked here. Are there any specific books or authors or resources, speakers, whatever it might be, that you would recommend to other professionals to say you have to go check these things out? These are critical.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kyle. So that has changed over time in my career, right? At different stages, different people were more influential to me.
Yeah.
So, early on in my career, it was the more inspirational, casting a vision about what you could do with your career. And, I realized I could do more than just go work for somebody in a job and get my paycheck and go home.
Right.
And so, for instance, Zig Ziglar was really helpful early on, like just this concept of setting goals. And he wrote a book called See You at the Top, and I don't even know if it's still in print anymore. And so those kinds of things helped me cast a vision for where I would like to go as a person, and were helpful. And then as I slowly moved into management and into running a business, the E Myth by Michael Gerber, you and I've talked about it, it's kind of revolutionized the way I look at business. That's been a very helpful book that I've read a couple times and really listened to his teaching. Dave Ramsey's material, and he has a great book called EntreLeadership. That is really he calls it leadership advice from someone that's in the trenches, and I think it's a good description of the book and a book that's very worthwhile. Jim Collins is obviously a go-to. Good to Great. I've read it at least twice, and I find myself always referring back to things in that book. Getting the right people on the bus. Who first and then what, and humble leaders and the hedgehog principle. All those things that Collins talks about. We find ourselves repeating that stuff over and over at our company. So those would be three, that really stand out to me, that I find myself going back to over and over and over. In terms of employees and hiring, we've discussed a little bit about bosses and getting people on your team. There's a book called Who, the A Method of Hiring, that's by Geoff Smart and Randy Street. And Geoff Smart is actually the son of Brad Smart that wrote the Topgrading book, which was kind of a popular book at one time. But this book I've read twice, and it's actually what I'm giving a webinar on today. And it is a fantastic book in terms of getting people on your team, and also helping me see how to be a boss and an employer. So those would be the ones that I would, that off the cuff resonate to me.
That's good. Those are all, those are some great resources, some great books. And I agree, they're sort of staples that, especially for any young entrepreneur or young, just kind of driven person in business, get those sooner rather than later. Some of those I waited until later before I finally decided to check them out, and wish that there were several of those things I thought, the E-Myth is one. I thought, man, I wish I would have gotten this 8 years ago. So, just don't wait. Those are such great resources in there. Before we close out, Jordan, what kind of advice might you have for others just that are striving for success, maybe some keys to success or some metrics that you've learned to focus on along the way? What advice could you give to others?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple things, and these are not in any particular order of importance, but so I would say reading is huge. Dave Ramsey was the first person. I used to hate reading in school. I hated it when someone made me read and this and that. But Dave Ramsey talked about successful people that have done a lot in life, they read. And they read a lot. And there's a sense in where knowledge is power. And so I thoroughly and wholeheartedly endorse that. Like, you should be an avid and voracious reader, and should be broader than just business books. I mean, you should be well-rounded. You should read fiction, you should read history, you should read, these things help you, and really more than anything else, they help prepare your mind to think about life. And so when we have these discussions about what success is, and, retirement and developing people, and, that's just a whole broad range of things, and you need the intellectual skill set to be able to deal with those discussions. And if you want to be a great leader and lead a lot of people, you need to have the intellectual resources to be able to do it. And we are a people that we learn and we get information through books and other people. So, but you just can't avoid not reading. And so I can't recommend that enough. I start reading more and more as the older I get. Now I try to read, 30 or 40 books a year or something like that. Just maybe one book a week or one every 2 weeks. You can set a goal early on to read one book a month. I mean, that's like 10 pages a day. I mean, it's like 15 minutes a day. Like anyone can do that. Like there's no excuse for not doing that. You don't have to go to business school or get your MBA. Like, you go pick up, Jim Collins and Michael Gerber and Dave Ramsey and you start doing that stuff, man, the MBA degree is, sorry for all those that have MBAs, but
there's a lot
you could be
of
light years ahead of
the
the MBA guy.
Practical side of business.
So that would be one thing. The other thing, and this, again, I know this is hard, especially if you're younger, is to not put money first. Like, be driven, but be driven more towards doing something that you love and are passionate about and serving other people well, and know that success will come on the heels of that.
Yeah.
If you achieve money for money's sake, I think you'll always find yourself wanting.
Yeah.
But if you go after serving other people and serving a cause or a mission really well, and you find ways to do that really well, the money and the success will come. Yeah. And I think you'll find that you'll be more satisfied as an individual.
Yeah.
And don't sacrifice your family on the altar of success either.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's great.
It's easy to do.
Advice.
It's easy to do, and there's a lot of wives and husbands too, if the wife is the one who's more business driven, that they suffer the consequences of that focus of their spouse, and that's unfortunate. Yeah. And I'm guilty of that at times. Yeah.
Well, that's great advice. There's some great information there. Jordan, I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you sharing your story and sharing some keys to success. I think a lot of people can relate to where you've been and where you are, and best of luck in where you're going.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. It's good talking with you.
Thank you for checking out today's Business Playmaker. Links to the resources discussed in today's episode are available in the show notes. For more information and resources from your host, you can visit him at www.kylegorman.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for the latest episodes. And until next time, make it a great day.